Well, good morning everyone, and welcome again. Welcome to one of a series of interviews from the Festival of the Sound in Parry Sound, Ontario, Canada. My name's Keith Horner, and I'm helping celebrate 30 years of fine music making at the Festival of the Sound. Janina Fialkowska is one of Canada's favorite pianists, and in recent times, one of our favorite pianists here at Parry Sound too. Janina was born in Montreal and has an international career for more than 3 decades. Along the way, there's been drama, and there have been hurdles that no pianist should have to confront. But true to the way she plays the music which has brought her fame, Janina has confronted life's challenges with openness, forthrightness, honesty, courage, and the feeling that something remarkable will happen if you only believe. And I think we can all take something from Janina's story, so I'm particularly looking forward to this interview. Welcome to this 30th anniversary series of interviews, Janina.
Thank you, Keith.
Let's start with chapter 1, as it were. And I want to take you back to the beginning in Montreal.
Right.
Fialkowska's...
It's a good Montreal name.
It's a good Montreal name. It's a Polish name.
Yeah, it's a Polish
Is that your
name.
father's side of the family?
It's my father was born in Poland. Actually born in Lwów, which was actually Lemberg, which was actually Austria-Hungary, which was, he was Polish.
Yeah. And your mother?
My mother was Canadian, and true Canadian, because I have Cree blood in me.
Ah.
Yes.
And were they both musicians?
No, not at all. My mother came from a rather well-to-do family, and suddenly at age 16 decided she loved music above all things and wanted to be a pianist, and her family sort of did that. But then she went and studied in Paris right before World War II and became quite proficient. But the war stopped everything, so she transferred all her ambition into her daughter.
Ah. And her daughter started playing the piano at 3 months, 4 months?
Just about. Actually, I was 4.
4?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted to. It wasn't that I didn't want to.
Yeah?
Yes.
And it was the piano that you wanted to play and
yes,
not the trumpet?
No, it was the piano. It was definitely the piano, because my older brother played the piano, and I wanted to play it as well.
So after Montreal, then you followed your mother's footsteps, I guess, and went to Paris.
Exactly. In fact, we asked the advice of my mother's old teacher, and she, of course, said, come to Paris and come and study with Yvonne Lefebvre, who was a magnificent teacher. I learned so much. Very theatrical, had wonderful hats and with ribbons and silk, and would desperately try and make you cry in classes, and because, she was very temperamental, but I never did cry in front of her. I'm very proud of that. Well, I could tell you one little short story about Madame, just to illustrate the myth around her. She was a wonderful teacher. I have to preface this by saying I owe her a lot. But she was giving a summer course of master classes, and my mother, I was only 15 then, so my parents had come along, and my mother was sitting reading in one of the breaks, and she had previously asked if she could take Madame's photograph, and Madame had said, absolutely not! And so, my mother said, okay, fine. And anyway, the next day she was reading in the garden, and one of the pianists, who since has turned out to be a major concert pianist, Imogen Cooper, who was also in the class, came out and just came to my mother and said, Madame is ready. And my mother, yes, Madame is ready to have her picture taken. And she'd taken the trouble that day of putting on her yellow silk dress with the purple polka dots and the huge hat with the ribbon. Anyway, Madame was ready.
That's wonderful. So after the attitude of Paris, you traded that for the attitude of New York, right?
For Mr. Sasha Gorodnitsky, whose probably second sentence to me was, Janina dear, I'm going to have to rid you of all those terrible French habits.
Well, he must have done a good job because you were his teaching assistant, right?
I was
for
his
5
teaching
years.
assistant for 5 years. Yes,
Yeah.
I was. Yes. No, we developed a very, very fond relationship, and he was a marvelous teacher. Very much in the Russian school. His teachers had been Joseph Levine, and his mentor had been Rachmaninoff. And not that I've ever gone that much into the Russian school, preferring more Chopin, Mozart, and people like that. But I learned a great deal from Sasha with the beautiful Russian sound. That's what I learned, really.
Right.
And a certain amount of real hard work ethic and discipline.
And were you training with him when you went in for the Rubinstein, the first master piano competition?
Yes, I was.
In Israel?
Yes, I was.
Did you have a strategy going into that competition? And of course, Janina won that competition, right?
Well, well, there's a story to that. There's a story to everything. Actually, that competition had been scheduled for 1973, but then one of the very unfortunate Middle East wars occurred at that time, and so it was put off. And I, at that time, was 22 years old and had never played a professional concert. I think I'd played one professional concert for $400, and I just didn't see where my career was going. And I'd actually entered law school and was due to start in September 1974 at the Université de Montréal, when they put the Rubinstein competition back on for September 1974. So Mr. Gorodnitsky, my parents said, go. And I went because I thought I might actually shake the hand of Arthur Rubinstein. That was enough incentive for me to go. And so I went, and I actually was not going to make the finals. I didn't have the marks to make the finals because in those days, we Canadians weren't very present on juries in international competitions. I was the first, really, who, after Ronald Turini, I was the first to win a major prize and get that far. And so Canadians weren't that well known, and we were the expendable ones, or among the expendable ones. Anyway, I found out later from Rubinstein himself that one of the members of the jury, although you weren't allowed to vote for your students, and he had students in the competition, he would mark down people that he thought might get in the way of a student, and he'd give me a 0. So there was a very big kerfuffle over that, and Rubinstein, this is totally unbeknownst to me at the time, had said, well, I'll remove my name from the competition and leave if she doesn't make the finals. Wow. So then the other some members of the jury thought this was equally dishonest, which it was. And so there was a fight, and he then said, I'll stay if she makes the finals, but then I will not vote in the finals. So in the end, I didn't win, but I made the finals and I got a prize.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but much better, of course, I got the attention of Arthur Rubinstein.
Yeah, and he became your mentor.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean, having a mentor?
Well, that means that I played a great deal for him. He was not a teacher per se, but he was someone who would then sit down and play it 5 times better than you played it and inspire you. And in that way, he was extremely inspirational. He, at that time, had just started to become completely blind. I mean, he just had a peripheral, so he had 2 more years of playing left in him. And he knew that this was coming to an end and also wanted to pass on to some lucky person like me, some of his knowledge, and picked me. And the thing is that he then, seeing that I had no career at that time, went on his last tour specifying that every concert he played, I would get the following year. So I went from 0 to 50 concerts, Philadelphia Orchestra, Chicago, London Philharmonic, everything.
As a musician, was he very sort of directive, or did he sort of encourage what was there already?
Yeah, he really encouraged what was there already.
Yeah.
And he used to say, well, in French, nous avons les atomes crochus, which means our atoms are connected. And I was a child, and I was just so overwhelmed by this. But there was something in that we did think along the same wavelength, because he wouldn't have picked me otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it was easy for me to fall into what he wanted for me. And, and then we just became friends.
He's also a real charmer in
Oh, he was
in
lovely.
life.
He was lovely, and he was everything good you've ever heard about Arthur Rubinstein is true. And he was one of the most generous, kind people I ever met. Just wonderful. And I used to spend summers with him in Spain, and he would just turn up at concerts of mine. I'd walk out on stage at the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. There he was in the front row with his head down like this so that I wouldn't, see him. But of course, everybody saw that white hair, and everybody in the audience was looking at him and not at me. So, But he never made me actually nervous. It didn't make me nervous to have him there. He was never, because I knew that he understood.
Yeah.
And so it was okay.
I associate you most particularly with the music of Chopin, Liszt, and Mozart, and you'll be playing two of these composers here at the festival. When did it become clear that this is the core repertory that you wanted to choose? I mean, not to the exclusion of other music by any means, but this is a core.
I think the Chopin thing was from the beginning, from the very beginning. I think when your name ends with SKA or SKI, you hardly have a choice, really. But I think it's.
It could have been Szymanowski.
Well, as you know. In fact, I've championed not only Szymanowski, but Panufnik and Ludoslavsky and all those people. But anyway, well, with Chopin, I firmly believe that, yes, okay, I won't go out on the limb and say he's the greatest composer in the world, because he isn't. There are others equally great. But I will go out and say that he was the man who understood the keyboard perhaps better than any other. Liszt and Ravel being in there as well. But Chopin, I love his music. I feel that I understand his music. And how can you not love Mozart?
Yeah.
He's the best. So, and Liszt,
end of subject.
Liszt, I just love the man.
Yes.
So, and his music. When I was playing a lot of Liszt, there were not many women playing it, and being in those days very ambitious.
And there are also not many people, except for Mr. Liszt himself, who gave the premiere of a piano concerto.
That's
I mean,
right.
you must be the second person after Liszt to give the premiere. How come that Janina Fialkowska gave the premiere of the third piano concerto of Franz Liszt?
Coincidence. No, it was because it had been discovered when the wall came down in '89 and all the Eastern European archives opened. There was a young doctoral student from Chicago, from I think Northwestern University, although I can't remember, who found the remaining folios of this unknown Liszt piano concerto that had been lost back in 1831. And so he brought it to the Chicago Symphony, and they had held it in a safe. And I had just recently played with Schulte in the Chicago Symphony, and I had also, on the orchestra series, played an all-Liszt recital with all the transcendental etudes, and they just put Liszt, Janina together, and that's how I got it.
It's a good gig.
Yeah, good gig. Yeah.
2001 was a significant year for you. That's when you married Harry Oesterle.
Yeah.
Harry's here today, I'm happy to say. So welcome,
the man with
Harry.
the beard.
Welcome back to Parry Sound. How did that make you feel?
Oh,
Is that a leading question or
that's
what?
a very leading question. I put that above anything that happened in my life as the best, by far the best thing. And I mean that over anything musical, anything. I was a certain age, and I was used to being alone on tour and being perfectly fine with that. And then along comes Harry, and now we travel up together. And I'm killing him with it, too. Because it's exhausting, and I had 50 years to get used to it. But now he's pretty good. No, he's had 10 years.
Okay,
So
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Then the following year, things took a turn. The drama really began. Take me through the emotional swing that must have followed your discovery of a lump on your left arm.
Well, first of all, think of Harry. He's just married me, and 6 months later, I have a biopsy on a tumor in my left arm, and it's cancer. And I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it was serious. I couldn't believe it was serious. And then, then it starts dawning on you. But then it was an amazing hospital in New York that I went to. I was lucky enough to go to the Sloan Kettering Memorial, where right from the beginning the doctors and the oncologists all got together to try and save as much of the muscle as possible. But they kept telling me that I was going to lose muscle, and I kept not believing it.
Yeah. So then you had that first surgery.
The first surgery in May 2000.
And you sat back at the piano, and what happened?
Well, after the first surgery, when they removed the tumor, this arm was like that. There was nothing. Silver lining in all of it was that the surgery did not affect my fingers. Mm-hmm. So I believed that it was going to be okay in the end. So I would practice every day for a year and a half like that, holding my fingers, so that it was boring. But, I picked some, the Chopin Fourth Ballade, the Coda, there's a great, left-hand passage. Yes. And then I thought there's all these piano concertos written for one hand, mm-hmm. the wrong hand, but why shouldn't I play it with the right hand? And that worked. And my friends in the orchestras, a lot of orchestras hired me to do it. So I didn't completely abandon my concert career during those 2 years.
No, I remember one concert quite well when you were playing a concerto. I think it was Ravel.
Ravel left-handed.
In London.
That was Prokofiev.
Prokofiev.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did the Ravel in Calgary and elsewhere, and Houston and various places.
All right, so here we are then, a one-armed pianist on the stage. Yeah. What was the next stage? How did you transform yourself?
Well, I had this experimental surgery coming up that had never been done in North America before, and the surgeon had never done it before, although he had neglected to tell me that, but I'm very glad he didn't. And he had seen it done in Switzerland. Anyway, that happened about 7 months after the initial surgery, much quicker than they thought, because my arm healed so quickly after the first one. And then I had to sort of wait for 5 months and see what happened. I wasn't allowed to move my arm for several months, and then I only passive motion. So that was perhaps the hardest time.
Yeah.
Although we kept busy, Harry and I. We, suddenly I realized that, hey, I live in Connecticut and I live near New York. And, as a student, of course, I did everything in New York. But as a concert pianist, you never had time to. So we were going to art galleries. We went to the opera all the time. We went to concerts. And we had actually had a very good time.
Was your arm in a sling, or what was it in a cast?
For the first 8 weeks, it was in a sling, and I was under sort of pain of death not to move it at all. And then it sort of hung a bit, but I was still not allowed to move it, but I had physiotherapy. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly in May, when I was told that now I could start, I was lying on the floor, and I shouted up to Harry, who was working upstairs, and I actually could lift it sort of like that. And that was it. And then I went to the keyboard, and I saw that I could play this far with it, this much lateral motion. And I thought, great, I can play Mozart. And then a few days later, I went a little bit further, and I thought, okay, life's good again. I can play Chopin. Wow. And it went a little bit further, but I've, of course, had to change things.
You haven't kept these two, and you didn't keep these two operations and the challenges you faced as a private thing, Janina. Do you think that not suffering in silence has really helped your recovery, helped your return?
Actually, I don't. That's an interesting question. At first, I really never wanted to talk about it too much, but I thought it's such a big thing. Why keep it quiet? People are going to suspect all sorts of things, and when they start imagining, really, it's much better to just tell the truth. Yeah. But then, right after, it got a little bit excessive, and I started living this over and over and over and over again. People kept asking me, but then I was beginning to be a bit selfish about it, and so I was saying to Harry, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm sick of it. And he would then show me an email I would have got from somebody who said, oh, well, your story inspired me, or it inspired me to go to another doctor. That happened several times. Mm-hmm. And they had the same thing that I had, and a lot of very good emails that made me feel like I should speak out.
Yeah.
And luckily now it's all more or less died down. But the other thing, I did have a certain amount of pride, and I didn't want the pity factor to enter when I was playing again. And but luckily, very soon after I got back, I had concerts in Poland, and I was playing very difficult, the Moszkowski Concerto, but nobody there knew anything about my arm, nothing.
Oh, okay.
And and it went very well. So then my confidence came back, and I thought, well, it's okay.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it is a truly inspiring story, and not just the people who've had parallel injuries or disease or whatever, but just the very spirit of the story is inspiration in itself. I've always thought the words honesty and integrity connected with your musicianship, Janina. You never were one of those pianists who does sort of acrobatics at the piano, so you wouldn't have had to have changed that aspect of your technique, the big hand gesture, that sort of thing.
I even had a bet with Rubinstein once. I was playing the Tchaikovsky Concerto for him and throwing myself around a bit. And he said, I'll bet you $10 you can't play it through without moving. And I, of course, won the bet. But learned the valuable lesson that it's absolutely unnecessary.
But at the same time, it can't have been easy relearning, and I'm sure it isn't easy, relearning repertory with a different range of motion in the arm, and different sort of muscle feeling.
It's wonderful to do that. Of course, there's no arm muscle memory left. The finger memory is, but the arm muscle memory, I had to relearn all these pieces that I knew back to front. Because the arm had to relearn them. But in doing so, it refreshed the pieces so much. In that way, I'm so incredibly grateful for all that happened to me, because I see all the repertoire that I play now in a completely different light. And I'll tell you that my left-hand passages are much more interesting now because I'm paying attention to them. I was before very much a right-hand pianist. Yeah, the theme is everything and the accompaniment sort of accompaniment. But now it's both.
Yeah. Well, I know that 5 years ago when you appeared here, you played the Chopin concertos with string quartet, the way that Chopin is known to have played them. And that in itself was a revelation. The interpretation, yes, it framed it as chamber music, with a very prominent piano part, of course.
Yes, of course.
But it wasn't just prominent piano part with a passive orchestra. Here it was as living chamber music, and that energy was very inspiring. You find this in all the composers you're relearning and rediscovering?
Yes, and I'm very lucky in that I'm able to now just play the music that I want to play. Oftentimes before all of this happened, perhaps I could have then, but I was, a conductor would ask me, would you play such and such a piece? And I would just say yes and learn it, whether I wanted to or not. And now I have to say that I'm much more choosy and find that it's much more agreeable. And I spend a tremendous longer period of time working on certain pieces than I did before, for the simple reason that I can only practice 3 hours a day, or then my muscle gets very tired. So I have to plan years in ahead. For example, I had 3 weeks off in June, and I decided to start playing Liszt again for the 2011 Liszt year. Well, I was actually practicing pieces that I'm going to play in 2011 because I know that next year, the Chopin year, there will be no time. So I do have to really look ahead.
Yeah.
And there's no question, for example, if I have a concert coming up in the old days, if I was a little bit behind on my practicing, well, I would just go to the piano and practice 7, 8, 9 hours and get it done. And I can't do that anymore. So that changes everything. And for the better. At least I look at it that way. Because now it takes me, I have longer periods of time thinking about the pieces that I'm playing, instead of rushing all the time.
Yes. Good. Well, that's a remarkable story, and thank you for sharing it. I know many of us will draw inspiration from it, and I know we're all looking forward to your masterclass and recital in the days to come here at the Festival of the Sound. You can find out more about Janina and read newsletters that Harry's put together about her latest concerts at janinafialkowska.com. And festivalofthesound.ca is where you can find out more about this series of interviews in the 30th anniversary of the festival. I'm Keith Horner. Till next time.
Thank you.